Oh, hey, how y'all doing? My name is Tom Ingram. I'm with the Master Gardeners here in Tulsa, and we got Brian Jervis here with us as well. How you doing, Brian?
Hi, I'm good. Hello, everyone.
Yeah, we're happy to be here today. We're going to do a little segment we're calling Inquiring Minds Want to Know. And these are questions that you all have submitted, children have submitted to us, and we're going to do our best to answer them then, because there's some interesting questions in here. But anyway,
I'm ready. I'm ready to get to these. I'm ready to get to these, Toms. Those 10-year-olds, you never know what they're going to ask. So
right.
It'll be fun. That's for sure.
That's right. So we're glad you're here. So let's see if we can answer some of these questions. Maybe we'll call this Stump Brian. Let's see if we can stump Brian today.
Yes, yes.
So anyway, here's the first question, Brian.
Okay.
It says, how do gardeners grow food in the winter? Which is a very good question, because a lot of our gardens are just lying there with nothing going on right now, our vegetable gardens anyway. So how do farmers grow food in the winter?
You know, that is a great question. Whoever asked that, I pat you on the back, because, you're thinking a little bit. And, right now, a lot of our grass outside is brown. A lot of our trees don't have leaves on them because it's wintertime, because it's cold. So, there's a lot of different things out there, believe it or not, that we can do to grow wintertime plants to either harvest for food or enjoy some flowers or some color out in the garden right now. So one thought comes to mind. We was shopping and bought some blueberries at Aldi, and I was looking. Well, that is a summertime plant, so we usually harvest those in the summer when it's warm. So how in the world are we getting them into our grocery stores now?
That's right.
Well, I looked at the origination and where it was grown, and it was grown in Peru. So it was not grown here. It was grown closer to the equator, where it's warmer. So they grow them, and then they ship them to our grocery stores. So that's one way, Tom, that comes to mind.
Yeah, I mean, that's true with a lot of the crops that are in our grocery stores right now. They are grown somewhere else where it's warmer. There are some crops that we can grow during the winter, but not necessarily enough. We can't grow tomatoes or corn or those type of things that we really like to eat a lot of times during the winter, because it just gets too cold. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes what we'll do is build some type of greenhouse. You can look at this photo here. This shows a really rather large greenhouse, but in those greenhouses, some of them, they just use the sun to heat up. And others, they actually have heating systems in those to keep them warm so they can grow all year long. Because to grow, you need sun, proper air temperature, nutrients, and you can get all that inside that greenhouse because the sun will still shine in there.
So yeah, that's a fun structure. Probably more of a farmer type structure where they're going to grow quite a bit of food for you. But this one is heated up. You can see the smokestack coming out the end of it. So that means they're having some heat that heats it up. We may be 30 degrees. It may be freezing outside, but inside that greenhouse, it may be a nice toasty 60 or 70 degrees. So that's enough to grow. Whether, we grow tomatoes inside that house in the wintertime, we grow cucumbers inside that house in the wintertime, or we can grow some cut flowers, those bouquets of flowers that our moms and dads may get, or, that we put out. Those cut flowers can be grown in that greenhouse as well to have pretty flowers throughout the winter. So that's a good example, Tom, of how we're growing food in the wintertime. Another thought is winter or cool season plants. We have a lot of lettuces. Lettuce kind of enjoy cooler weather. They don't like it when it's real cold and frozen outside, but when it's kind of moderate, 30 degrees, just above freezing, they can grow outside in the weather. And it may get cold, they slow down, and then when it warms up, they pop back up and they can be harvested. So we can do a lot of food in the wintertime for sure in and around here.
Right. And even like that photo was of a rather large greenhouse, and it looks like it was next to some other rather large greenhouses. But even the home gardener, it's not that unusual for gardeners to have maybe a little smaller greenhouse out back where they're growing stuff just for themselves. So
I was talking to a master gardener yesterday. He was in here answering the phones, and he's growing lettuce. underneath lights in his garage. So, you know, he's putting the lights on there, and then the temperature around is warm enough to sustain lettuce. He thought he would harvest it next week. So he's been growing it for about a month, and it's ready to harvest. So he'll have lettuce in January at his house. So that's pretty cool stuff there.
Right. So, I mean, to answer your question, that's how we still grow food. We either kind of make some changes to the environment by building a structure or doing it indoors or something, or we get our food from somewhere else where it's summer. It's summer in other parts of the country, or down in Florida, or maybe Southern California, it's warmer and they can still keep growing crops. So,
but good question on that one. That one's a good question, and it makes sense. So.
Yep. All right. I think we got that. Thanks for that question. Let's go to the second question. How deep can a worm live? Which is a very good question. You know, Master Gardeners, we go out and teach classes on worms. And if you've been watching this series on RSU of these shows, we had a program on worms. But for the most part, worms like to live in that top 18 inches of the soil, about 1.5 feet. Because that's where all the nutrients are. They need the water, they need the air, they need the decaying stuff so that they can eat. They eat that, they digest it, they poop it out as fertilizer, and it fertilizes and keeps that top layer of soil healthy. The problem is, as you go deeper, they kind of get further and further away from the water and the air and the nutrients, so they tend not to go that deep. Plus, the soil just gets harder from being so compacted over the years. It kind of changes texture and gets hard. But in this photo, you can kind of see in that picture, you can see how the soil at the top is kind of nice, dark, and what we might say kind of healthy looking soil. But as you go down in the photo, you can see how it kind of changes color and changes to a lighter gray. And that's probably more like clay. So in theory, worms can go down 6.5 feet. And in the winter, I think they probably do go down a little deeper than they are during the summer just to stay warmer. But for the most part, that top 18 inches is where they're going to be.
You know, worms are important for us. They help kind of till up or cultivate the soil. And as they dig through, like you said, they eat organic matter, keep digging, loosening that soil. And as they're eating, they're pooping out good stuff. And that's pooping out good nutrients that our plant roots will then come in and take a hold of. And those plant roots help bust that soil and make that soil a little better as well. So, you know, over time, as we keep worms and kind of cultivate worms, keep them alive, then we will add more nutrients and make our soil healthier. So, you know, and like you said, Tom, that 18 inches is a pretty good rule of thumb. They're going to be, you know, they're lazy. They don't like to dig through that nasty clay soil. So they're going to stay right along that top. But like you said, in the wintertime, it does get cold up at the top. So they do tend to go a little deeper during the winter. But we love the worms as gardeners. We love to protect them. We don't want to do a lot of things to harm them because they're helping our soil. And the more we can do that, the better soil we're going to have, the better we're going to be able to produce food or produce, you know, flowers or whatever we're growing. So, but worms are good. Worms are our friend. And, you know, the better soil we have, the more more earthworms we're going to have in the soil. So they're not gross. They're not slimy. They're good for gardeners for sure.
Well, you said slimy. That relates to another question we have coming up.
Okay.
One of the things I like to talk about when we do have the worm classes is talk and explain. I mean, all you all out there, you've probably seen a football field, know the size of a football field about. Did you know that you can have about 1 million worms underground in the size of a football field? That's a lot of worms right there.
Who counted that many, Tom? I'd hate to have to count to 1 million.
Oh, I want to say I did, but I didn't.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, we love our worms. We appreciate them, and we try and do our best for them. All right, good question, though.
Yep.
Next question here. It says, my mom and I love to garden plants. We water them when the sun comes out, and we get so happy because they grow. Why does gardening make you so happy, Brian?
Man, it does. And you have have winter time or, you know, summers like we had last summer, and it just can't do a lot of things, you know, that we normally would do. So get out there and dig in the dirt. There's just something with getting dirt on our hands. And you know, I grew up loving gardening. I got it from my grandpa, where he gardened all the time. And those older folks, that's how they fed their family, with gardens. So I really learned to appreciate that with grandpa. And, so that's kind of where my love come from. And there's just something about it that just makes you smile. Yeah, you get out there and pull weeds in the summertime, it gets pretty rough, and there's not a lot of smiling towards, after an hour of pulling weeds. But there's just something about it that, looking at taking care of your garden, taking care of that, say, cucumber plant, and then being able to eat a cucumber off that plant. There's just something about that. And if you haven't tried it, it's something that you need to try, because it is fun. And yeah, I'm a little biased. I love gardening, but I also, I love eating cucumbers that I've grown in my garden.
Well, they just taste better if you grew them. I mean, there's just something about, I don't know whether it's a sense of accomplishment or whatever, but if from planting that seed and watching it grow and kind of fertilizing it, trimming it, taking care of it, and then all of a sudden it gets these little flowers. When those little flowers get pollinated and turn into little fruits, and those fruits grow and you get to eat them, it really turns you from an observer of nature, if you will, to a participant. You're participating in this and helping to grow your own food, and it's just kind of fun. I mean, it tastes better. Anything you grow at home in your own garden, almost 90% of the time, is going to taste better than what you would just go buy.
It does. And it's not hard. I mean, I mentioned lettuce earlier, but, we have radishes that, we can plant a radish seed, and then within a month, that radish will be ready to eat. And, some of you may not like radishes, but, you can, if you grow it, you can pull it out and clean it and dip it in ranch. And man, you'll be surprised. You'll be surprised what growing a radish, which I don't necessarily care for them, but if I grow them, I'm going to eat them because it's kind of fun. That's what I grew. I ate it, but there's a lot of different things out there you can try. So I want to challenge you all that if you thought you may want to grow a garden, tell your folks, tell them to go, let's buy some radish seeds, or let's buy some lettuce seeds, and let's put them in the ground and see what happens. And, those two are in the cool season. So in the springtime, they will grow and do fine. So I challenge you to do that and just figure out why gardening makes you smile and makes you feel better. It's, believe it or not, sometimes it's funner than that iPad. I know my daughter loves her iPad, but when we get out and garden a little bit, she forgets about that iPad and gardens. And when we get to eat it, it makes it even funner. So garden just makes us smile.
Right. Well, and then there's the added benefit too, that these plants, most of them are going to attract pollinators, which would include butterflies, maybe some bees, different insects. So you not only get the vegetables, you get to see all these other things that come and join and visit your garden. So it's really pretty much fun. And like Brian said, you can start small. You can start in a can in the backyard, or a bucket in the backyard, or on the balcony of your apartment or whatever, and just go from there. But anyway.
And again, if you don't want to plant something to eat, plant a flower or something that will flower, and you can either cut the flower off and bring it inside and put it in a jar and enjoy the flower. So you don't necessarily just have to garden vegetables. There's a lot of different gardening techniques out there, types of gardening, whether, like I said, vegetables or your flowers, grass. Have you ever thought about grass as gardening? Where you take care of a lawn where where you're able to play on it. That's gardening too. So a lot of different types of gardening, but I challenge you to try it. I think you'll enjoy it. And if you need help, of course, we're always here to answer your gardening questions. So give us a call if you're having some questions.
But basically, I guess we got into this because it was fun.
That's right. It's a blast. I enjoyed it. It's been a good career. I went to school for 6 years to garden, believe it or not. So I'm a horticulturist, and I studied gardening in college. So that's pretty fun too. And I've sure had a fun career doing it, because back to my grandpa probably, and how he grew gardens to feed his family. I learned to appreciate that. So you can even make a career out of gardening, and it's been a fun career too.
All right. Next question. And I mentioned this earlier. So why are worms so slimy?
Well, gross.
Worms, I don't like to say they're slimy. I like to say that they're moist, they're damp, they're a little bit wet. And the main reason, the main reason they are, you look at this picture here of the body of a worm, you can see that it has a mouth. It has 5 hearts, actually. It has esophagus, it has a stomach, it has intestines. One thing it does not have are lungs. The worms do not have lungs. They absorb air, oxygen, through their skin. So for them to be able to do that, their skin has to stay moist. When their skin dries out, they can't absorb that. And I'm sure all of you all have seen, maybe after rain or something, you've seen like some worms on the driveway or the sidewalk or something. They're out there and they're just fine initially, but if they dry out, they can't breathe and they die. So I guess you could say they're slimy. They can feel a little slick and slippery, but that's really them just trying to keep themselves moist so they can breathe. And which kind of relates back to what we were talking about earlier in the worms, how deep they can go. They have to stay where they can have some moisture in the soil as well. So, you know, it's not that bad. It washes off if you pick them up if you want.
Yeah, no, I mean, they use that slime to breathe, like you said. And, the wetter the soil, the wetter the soil is, the more they can move around and breathe and feel better. So, the moisture is good for them. Dry soil they don't like as well, and that's one of the reasons, like you was saying. But yeah, the worm biology is kind of fun, believe it or not. I mean, I guess we're kind of nerdy on that, Tom, but we like our worms, like we said earlier, because they do dig in that soil and make our soil better for us. So, but we are worm nerds or plant nerds, so we like them too. So.
Right. Well, and just maybe one last factoid about the worms. And, they underground, we've got air and water, et cetera. And oftentimes the times you'll see the worms out on the driveway or the sidewalk or something is after a big rain. So what has happened is that rain has kind of saturated the water. There's no air for them to breathe. So they come up to kind of, get out from drowning, basically, and then they wander off and get lost and end up drying out. So there's a balance there between too wet or wet enough, but they need to stay moist or slimy, if you want to say they're slimy.
Definitely. And, we were out digging in the garden, and I've seen some pretty good sized worms, about the size of your hand and about the size around as your finger. And man, those things could get in there and plow that little area up real quick, as big and as aggressive as they are. But they don't hurt you. They some think they're gross, but they're not. They're just a little moist, like you said, so they can breathe. And you can look at them just fine, but then you need to probably get them back into the soil.
Right. My wife and I go on walks in the morning, and our walks take longer after a rain because we're having to stop and pick up the worms and put them back in the soil out of the street. But that's just me. Don't be like me.
They make good fishing. They make good fishing bait. That's not necessarily good for the worms, but I like to use them for fishing bait too. So
there you go.
Yeah.
All right. Last question for today is a very good question. I think it says, are insects good or bad in the garden? Or, depends on the day, I think, really.
It is, and that's probably my favorite subject. I love insects, and yes, they are good ones, and they are bad ones too. So, bad in the sense that, they're going to chew up your plants, and also bad in the sense that they may spread disease. Not a lot, very few will do that. For the most part, most of the insects in our world are good insects. They're not going to harm us. So a lot of the times, we hear about spraying insects and doing that, but we don't hear a lot about the really good insects that are just there feeding on other insects, pollinating our crops. A lot of good insects out in the world, Tom.
Well, just like you said, we would not be eating a lot of the crops that we eat if we didn't have insects pollinating those, which would be another question another time to talk about pollination, but they're absolutely required for pollination. And so we need the insects, and even if the insect is eating up your plant, it's not doing that maliciously. It's just hungry. And that's
surviving.
Yeah, that's what it does. And you planted that plant, and that's food to them. So we have to kind of balance along. But I mean, a good example of, I guess, what maybe the most obvious good insect we would say would be the lady beetle or the ladybug, like in this picture. You know, they're popular in kids' stories and books and things, but a lot of gardeners use them to counteract this insect right here, which is an aphid. And aphids are like the bane of our existence as gardeners, Brian.
They are. They're probably our number one pest. And, you know, this guy, the aphid, I don't know if there's much good with him, but there is. I mean, there's a reason there. But that aphid is in there sucking the plant juices, real small, real soft bodied. But then this lady beetle comes along and he feeds on this aphid. So it's kind of lady beetle food, I guess, would be a good thing on aphids. But they can do a lot. There's a lot of other insects out there as well. But you know, you go to the next picture, Tom, and you see thousands of aphids, and they may be up and down that stem. Well, every one of those are piercing their mouth part into that plant, sucking juices. So that plant is going to struggle a little bit, especially if it's not as healthy. So we need a lot of ladybugs out there, lady beetles out there to feed on those aphids. So you know, lots of good and bad insects out in the world. One thing that comes to mind that kind of would cover both good and bad would be honeybees, Tom. You know, you take a honeybee. If you get stung by a honeybee, I think most every person would say that's a bad bug, a bad insect. But that honeybee is so important to pollinate our plants, to be able to get flowers from it or vegetables from it. So then that honeybee is a positive or a good thing in our garden. So it depends what you're talking about and when you're talking about that insect, Tom. That kind of makes sense to me.
Yeah, well, it's probably kind of like some of our friends. We have friends that we like, and they maybe irritate us sometimes, but they're our friends. You know, that doesn't change who they are. So I don't know. But anyway, that's good. There's good insects and bad insects, at least in our mind. To them, they're just insects. And we assign whether we call them good or bad. But they all have, most of them, I question mosquitoes. I'm not sure that mosquito has any purpose, but
any good purpose. Yeah, I think give us exercise swatting them away.
But they're food for bats. So, I mean, I don't know. But anyway.
There you go.
There probably is no bad insect thing. We just don't like some of the things some of them are doing. So,
but, you know, I talked about me being a horticulturist. There's entomologists. Entomology is the study of insects. And they've got departments in colleges that do nothing but study insects. Right. You know, there's people out there, they do nothing but study this type of lady beetle, you know, to find out differences in it to help us later on. So entomology is a very interesting career, and it's a fun career because we have thousands of different types of insects out there, and we need to learn about them. We need to know about if they are good or if they are bad, or even in case of some insects where you have maybe the worm is bad because they're feeding on the plant, and then as they go through a metamorphosis, their adult may be a good pollinator. So like a butterfly worm will feed on the plant, which would be bad. And then when they metamorphosize into the butterfly, that butterfly is then pollinating our plant. So you got one insect that his life cycle may be a good when he's little, but then when they get older, they may be a good positive, being that they pollinate our plants. So something that you may not have thought of before.
So it's probably wrong to say there's good insects and bad insects. They're just insects, but sometimes we don't like what some of them do. Maybe. How's that?
I like that one, Tom. That's a good one. That's a good
All
one.
right.
But, when we go out and spray, we just got to be careful. If we are having a lot, aphids are one of those examples. If we get a lot of them, we may have to spray a pesticide or a soap or something like that to kill them. So when we do that, we want to make sure we're doing it at the right time, not causing harm to those good insects if there may be some out there.
All right. Well, that wraps up our questions for today. We will be back next week with another set of questions from kids. And we'll see you next time on Inquiring Minds Want to Know. Thank you, Brian.
No problem. Happy gardening, everyone.
All right. See you next time.